Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. On this episode, I host Dr. Sarah Bireete. Dr. Bireete is the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance, CCG. Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for accepting to be on the Hard Questions show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sarah, let's start off with, so we know that the elections are just a couple of years, 2026. The Electoral Commission recently launched its roadmap, and they're asking for an estimated 2 trillion shillings to conduct the next elections. Where that money is going to come from, I don't know. But clearly, it's an opportunity for Ugandans to participate in the way they are governed, as enshrined in Article 38 of the Constitution. And this means that we speak up and we have a say in how we are governed and how the democracy is supposed to shape up. Now, Sarah, and that brings in the aspect of civic space, the ability for people to speak up and speak out on different issues, good governance, accountability, human rights abuses. We wanted you to, first of all, ground us in civic space, especially as the election draws in. What have you noticed in the past, and how would you measure civic space where we are right now?
Well, civic space basically refers to the set of regulations, policies, and laws that govern the participation of citizens in their governance. And we have a range of these laws. High on the agenda is the Public Order Management Act, and the Chairman Electoral Commission did warn political parties as he launched the roadmap that this doesn't mean that they should hold political rallies. Something that I find very disturbing, because political parties, by their nature, communicate to masses through political rallies. There shouldn't be a period in a country that is democratic to say that today you can hold a political rally, tomorrow you cannot. Political parties are supposed to set their agenda and execute it the way they wish. Meaning that even if we've just concluded the elections, political parties are supposed to continuously recruit members and promote their beliefs and policies. So when you launch a roadmap and you are sending a warning that this doesn't mean you should hold political rallies, that alone communicates to the world that Uganda's civic space is highly controlled and highly closed.
Well, Sarah, but maybe the Electoral Commission is coming from that space that there's a calendar to follow. It's not yet open.
Yes, but you're talking to agencies that have their own calendars on how to recruit members, how to market their ideology and beliefs and values, and how to get support for their parties financially, in terms of numbers and otherwise, and how to control public opinion, because that's what political parties are set to do. So once you have this situation that political parties are not free to go about their business, that is highly telling of the civic space. There are also other ways through which citizens participate in their governance.
Before you go to the next one,
yes,
I wanted to get right there because the body politics of this country is beginning to shape up. We are seeing people who are doing seemingly rallies, going across the country and organizing rallies in big numbers, and nothing has been done to them. And I think, to be specific, we've seen the MK movement moving around the country, organizing, to some extent, they call them birthday parties, they call them visits, they call them different names. But through the political lens, it's largely looked at as mobilizing grassroots, and those could be considered rallies.
You don't need the political lens. MK movement is a political movement, and they are clear about it. They are clear in the way they oppose their own mother party, the NRM. They are clear about declaring ambitions for 2026. They are clear about deployments and the shadow cabinet. And they are a political movement. There is you don't need lenses to look at it. You just need your naked eyes. And it's true that Uganda is a classic example of animal farm, where laws apply to some people and they do not apply to other people. or we do not have uniform application of laws. And the MK movement, unfortunately, is unconstitutional because we are talking of a serving soldier in this case. But why is he untouchable? Because of his biological belonging. The father happens to be the commanding chief, but he's also the one who presides over protection of the Constitution that he's applying differently when it comes to his son. When you look at executive authority and the oath that the president states, it's very clear. The duty of the president and executive authority is derived from the protection of the Constitution. That's Article 99 of the Constitution. When you read Article 208, Clause 2 of the Constitution, it's very clear on the character and conduct of members of UPDF, non-partisan, non-political, obedient to civilian authority, among others. If you go to the UPDF Act, Article 187 is very clear on conduct prejudicial to that perceived of a military officer. And the code of conduct is clear on the punishments. But we're supposed to implement these punishments? He happens to be the father of a military man violating the Constitution. He also happens to be the #1 defender of the Constitution. And unfortunately, as the president favors his son by failing to implement the Constitution, he's delegitimizing his executive authority and the sovereignty rights of Ugandans.
So do you think that someone needs to rein in to stop these seemingly rallies, just like the Electoral Commission had mentioned, that there should be no rallies until further notice, or we should leave them to, to do what they want to do because they have that liberty?
Ideally, parties are supposed to do their work.
Parties, to be specific.
Political parties. Even citizens are supposed to do their work. We are here engaging in the civic work that we set out to do. Everybody, according to Article 138 and 72 of the Constitution, every citizen is supposed to freely go about the work that aspires them and participate in their governance nationally.
Yeah. So Sarah, where are we in terms of civic space? You're still building up.
Yes, so when you go away from the political parties, of course, before we leave the political parties, I think it's important to note that the major political parties are limping or have been taken over. You can start from the Federal Alliance, where the approach by the regime has been to buy off two principles in each party. The Federal Alliance was almost closed by buying off the president and vice president. The UPC bought off the president, and the wife, the first lady, is participating in that buy-off as a minister. Then you go to DP, the president and secretary general bought off. Now they are in fights. And next is FDC, they are in fights. The president and secretary general allegedly bought off, and they are in chaos. So these are the major political parties in the country. You are remaining with only the National Unity Platform. So basically, you have no parties as we go into the elections. And it's likely to be a one-man show. And that's the intention. As the president stated during the swearing-in of 2016, when he said that he's going to finish off parties, he's going to eat them like samosa. And ideally, the president's mindset, he does not want to operate in a multi-party setup, because multi-party means multiple parties. By basic English, many parties competing for power. And you have a president who takes oath, holds the Constitution, and says, I'm going to finish off parties. Because he wants to operate in a one-party state, which is unconstitutional.
Sarah, the president's job is to provide a conducive environment for political parties to grow, and not for him to run the political parties. If he's a good politician and draws in these other opposition political parties to his side, you would actually credit him for being a good politician.
I wouldn't mind President Museveni mobilizing and taking over the actors in other political parties. I wouldn't mind that. And it's legal. It's okay. But when you make a statement that I'm going to finish off, this is a statement on record at Kororo during the swearing-in of 2016. I'm going to finish off political parties. I'm going to eat them like samosa. That is unconstitutional. And that is not okay.
But you want to give it to him, though. I mean, for example, the Democratic Party, he was seated in the same chair, the president, no, but Mao, where you're seated, and he said that the opposition, was not playing a fair game, and therefore he took a detour. And now he's right, the DP is right next to the NRM, and therefore can work with the NRM to advance the country forward. So from your side, from your context for political parties, do you think that in a way this affects civic space?
Yes, I know that the UPC alleges to be in an alliance, unwritten, and the DP alleges to be in a cooperation with a written document, although I've never seen a signed copy. I'm yet to see one, because the president said he didn't sign anything. And it would be normal in a multi-party setup for parties to form an alliance or a cooperation or any other name you want to call it. This act is very common in developed countries where it is difficult for any single party to attain majority to be able to form government. They usually form government through coalitions. But what happens is, when a parties form coalitions, they form coalitions based on their ideologies, values, and beliefs, where they meet each other. And these alliances have a timeline, and for the time they are in alliance, they are on one side. So let me give an example of government. If DP had formed a cooperation with NRM, the DP MPs would have shifted to the ruling party side together with their president. But now you have a president on one side and he's talking opposite to his MPs on the other side. What kind of cooperation is that? It's a joke. It's vulgarization of our politics in this country.
You want to give it to President Museveni for actually being
vulgarizing?
Able to, no, for managing. This is politics, Sarah. Bringing in big wigs of different political parties into your space is politics.
I will give it to him for his threat of finishing up parties. It's becoming a reality. And I hope NUP won't fall for that, because it's the last man standing. If this is struggling to get rid of people that were compromised, I wish them well. So I will give it to him on that basis. But I will call him out and remind them that under Article 68 of the Constitution, running a one-party system is unconstitutional.
Sarah, cast a spotlight into the future. The elections are beginning to play out. In the past, we've seen that as after the Electoral Commission releases its calendar, activities begin to form out, and then people begin to speak up, and along the way, arrests start, human rights violations start, hate speech starts. What do you see in the next 2 years in terms of people's ability to speak up and actively participate in their governance?
I want to use a baseline in responding to this question. I want to use a baseline of the 2021 elections and the nature of the by-elections we've had as a country. And if you look at the character of the 2021 elections, it was the worst election this country has ever had. And unfortunately, if you map out the 29 years of the 1995 Constitution, every other election is worse than the previous. The 1996 elections were okay, free and fair, with a little skirmishes because Kawanga Semogere was attacked in Rukunjiri, and there was a bit of small violence in Kampala areas. When you go to the 2001 elections, violent. That's when we started seeing the shooting at Bulange, a soldier who ran a vehicle into a rally in Mkono Besige's rally, death, the post-election, the death of Manenero in CMI custody, and all the violence that came with that. 2026 elections, the violence slowed down as the rigging.
2016.
206.
Oh, 206, yeah.
Yes, the violence slowed down a bit as compared to 2001, but the rigging was in high gear and commercialization. So 206 elections brought in the high commercialization of politics. There was a saga where ballot boxes were found in a coffin in northern Uganda. So the rigging and commercialization set in. And 2011 elections, violence, commercialization, rigging that led into high inflation. If you go to the statement by the then governor, the late Mutebile, who said, I made a mistake, I allowed people to raid the treasury, it will never happen again. But the clock has never turned back on high commercialization, violence, and rigging. When you go to 2016 election, same story. Every other election is worse than the previous. 2021 elections, the 1911 murders that are unanswered up to today, nobody held accountable. You go to the violence, we did a pictorial coverage of 2021 elections from nomination to a declaration of results. The violence you see on that link, just pictures talking. General Chamuntu's political rallies were disrupted 46 times. When General Chamuntu reached in Kasese, he was told to drive through. He was not allowed to talk to anyone, not even a radio station. Honorable Muriat was arrested 53 times on the campaign trail. Bob Wine's rallies were shot at every moment until he was pushed to campaign in a bulletproof. Let's go to the by-elections. Kayunga elections, it was the first by-election. Candidate shot. MPs arrested. Media arrested. Results announced almost at gunpoint. You can pick the Soroti by-election. There was a ballot papers, predict ballot papers flying around. There was a clip that has never left my mind. Justice Byabakama was confronted with the whole ballot box of predict ballots. And he was asked about the origin of these predict ballots. It's important for the citizens to know that electoral materials are property of Electoral Commission. In every election, we have predict ballot papers. That can only be done with the connivance of Electoral Commission. I know that Justice Byabakama was asked as he launched the roadmap about the malpractices and irregularities, and he said it is beyond his control. Justice Byabakama, you are the source of predict ballots in our elections, and it is not beyond your control. You must check your systems.
So as we build up, what do you see?
I just see the worst election that Uganda is yet to see.
Aren't you a prophetess of doom?
No, I am using evidence to analyze what election to predict. So what do we need to do to prevent, to have a normal election in this country? It's what I want to discuss. How can we have a normal election in this country? President Museveni, get out your army from politics. The reason you took up arms and fought the then government of the day was because of irregularities in elections, according to your own account. Why are you presiding over irregularities that are likely to drive this country into chaos again? Why? Get your army out of our elections. The next thing we need to do is Electoral Commission. If they think they are overwhelmed to preside over an election as envisaged in the Constitution, Articles 1, 60, 61, and others, Article 1 guarantees Ugandans a free and fair, credible election. Are they able to preside over this election? If they think they can't, let them resign. And if they can, then Ugandans deserve a nature of election that is defined in our Constitution 29 years down the road. I know people talk about electoral reforms, and the Supreme Court
recommended that electoral reform should come 2 years before.
Yes, they had recommended 8 reforms then, and they also recommended that electoral reforms in this country should be done 2 years.
2 years
after an election.
After an election.
Already 2 years have passed.
Norbert Mao is beginning the constitutional review process, the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Are you optimistic?
That's what he said 1 year ago when he joined the NRM. He said he's coming into NRM and he made a promise. Key among his promise was electoral reforms, free and fair elections, transition, national dialogue, and protection of human rights. I'm yet to see him achieve any of those things. I have not seen any headway for him, but I wish him well, because those are desirable things that he talks about. It's what every Ugandan wants to see.
Yeah.
So we are yet to see whether 1 year down the road, whether he can do these reforms to deliver a credible election as envisaged in the Constitution. It's also important to note that he's the political supervisor of the Electoral Commission as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. So whatever has been happening in the Electoral Commission that he has witnessed on the opposite side, he's now the political head, and he has political accountability to deliver to Ugandans. I know that at one time he was defranchised from voting. These are the mistakes a Ugandan would expect him to address. He has been a victim of illegal elections several times in this country.
Yeah.
Is he able to deliver? I just wish him well.
I hope he does. Let's talk about the role of civil society. Civil society was quite a very vibrant force to stand up and speak up for the people. Slowly by slowly, many of the civil society organizations are coiling their tails away and sliding into the spiral of silence, where we expect them to speak up and call government to account and hold them, call them out. What became of civil society?
We are part of the broken system. We are part of the broken system in this country. We have been defranchised, although we have some bit of resilience to keep pushing for better Uganda that we want to see. But civil society has been battered. And the battering has not just stopped at NGOs. We can talk about the closure of the 54 NGOs. We can talk about the
freezing of accounts.
Freezing of accounts that has finally been declared illegal by the Constitutional Court. So there's a bit of a breather there. We can talk about the legal regime that governs NGOs. We spend the whole of January just for compliance. 30 days of a month just to comply. Comply with the Financial Intelligence Authority, comply with the Data Protection Unit, comply with the NGO Bureau, comply with the URSB, comply with KCCA. I mean, the list is endless. I see your expression. NGOs report to 8 agencies in this country instead of 1. And that is time-wasting, time-consuming. It's really a nightmare. Away from that, we have had a shrinking support base. It's important to note that ideally, if we were a developed country, ideally the citizens would be able to support civic and political work in the country. But we are in an impoverished country that is highly dependent on debt. Our debt threshold is at 52%, away from the recommended 50% of GDP. So you can imagine if civil society work was to be purely dependent on the citizens that are struggling themselves, then we would have no work to do. So we depend on charity, the donor and the rest. And we witnessed the closure of the biggest fund put together by the EU member states, the DGF, in this country that has completely closed shop. That affects 80% of civic work in the country in terms of work, jobs, support for NGOs and the rest.
That were in the governance space.
Yes. Away from that, we have seen also the closure and packing of the UN Human Rights Office at the time when we are witnessing increasing human rights violations, including kidnaps and torture and trial of civilians in military courts. You close the UN Human Rights Office because you do not want close proximity and monitoring of your violations. Away from that, now we are witnessing the debates with the World Bank. I know that you don't sound politically correct to say that World Bank has great impact, and you can see the actions of the government to say, no, we can manage. But why did you get 52% of your GDP through borrowing? Why do you have 17 trillion in your budget, going to 19 trillion, just service debt? We borrowed service debt, not to pay back. We have a debt maturing in 2025. But from 2019 to date, we have depleted our reserves as a country by half. By 2019, our reserves were at $6.4 billion. We are now at 3.96. That was of last year. I'm sure now it could have gone down further. I hope we will not reach at a time when we have zero reserves as a country, because that means something else. So as we see the squabbles with the World Bank does not just give loans. It gives technical capacity and grants. And it is also the most lenient lender that any country can have, between 1% and 2% of interest, but also with the most favorable terms and long period to pay back. And you can also renegotiate terms, and we can have your debt forgiven, like we have previously benefited from debt forgiveness as a country. So what remains then of our alternatives? You can look at the BRICS. You go to China. China loans attract interest of between 4% to 6%.
Yeah.
But also their terms are non-negotiable, and you must give security in terms of sovereign property. Our airport is in the hands of Chinese. Collections from our airport go to an escrow account in Exim Bank. So how many more sovereign properties are we going to mortgage as we tell the World Bank to go to hell?
Yeah.
You can go to local banks, as I conclude on that. Local banks have interest of 7% to 10%, but also with a shorter term period to pay.
Yeah.
It's not favorable for countries. So that's the state where we are, and that's why civil society cannot be supported locally.
So you're looking at going into this election with a weak civil society, largely because of the funding, because of the legal and policy framework around civil society. Oh, by the way, I heard that there was a new thing that the NGO board asked all civil society organizations to do. Yeah, the whole beneficiaries.
Through the amendment of the Companies Act.
So you can imagine. So in other words, we shouldn't strongly look at we go into this election with a weakened civil society.
I think it's also important to add that the way civil society acted in the 2021 elections, the weaknesses notwithstanding, was not desirable. First of all, we were given long-term accreditation. And on the day of voting, 28 of our members were arrested. And the excuse that was given with the endorsement of the vice chair of the Electoral Commission was that those civil society were never accredited. So we had our people arrested and they were reporting to police for 6 months. So then the question you need to ask today is, if you arrested civil society accredited to observe elections for observing the elections you accredited them to do, will you allow them to observe elections?
Wow. Interesting. That scares me a little bit, Sarah, especially from the time that we usually during, as elections draw in, we expect civil society to observe and highlight the evils or, bring government to account. I don't know how that is going to play out. But let's go to the other civic organizations, including religious leaders and cultural leaders, have a moral role to stand up and speak up. Do you think that we should be optimistic that, about their involvement and calling out the state?
Over time, I think the Uganda Kingdom has been the last man standing on critical issues in the country. I rarely hear other cultural institutions really making a contribution to the betterment, or an attempt to make a contribution to the betterment of this country, other than the Uganda Kingdom. So we need to give them credit and ask them to keep going.
The religious leaders?
The religious leaders, some of them are co-opted by the state. Some of them speak up, but they are largely lukewarm. We had an interaction with them after the Kampala killings. And we asked them, Because when you go to the Bible, especially, we met the Interreligious Council of Uganda. If you go to the religious books, whether Bible or Quran, you know, God's mandate to his agents is to keep. We used the quotation by Jesus when he asked Simon Peter 3 times, "Do you love me? Then take care of my sheep. Do you love me? Then take care of my sheep." So we asked them the well-being of the sheep that they are mandated to take care of religiously. If people are being murdered on Kampala streets by the officers that are meant to protect them. And then they issued a statement then asking for postponement of elections because of violence. And I know that they did not achieve that, but that was a good attempt. At least they came out and they gave their reasons. Because people were claiming that the security officers were claiming that they are killing people because people are violating the COVID regulations. Of course, that was an excuse. And so what role, it did not have impact, but it was a good attempt. And they can do better. They can do better. So my call to them is that they have a duty, biblically, to take care of the sheep, especially the faith that I profess, the Christian faith, where Jesus was clear on the role of his agents to take care of the sheep. They should not watch as the state throttles people in the name of keeping power.
I hope so. I want to be optimistic. Sometimes what pushes me back is that the deep relations with the state and the religious leaders, and where do they find that thin line of, holding them accountable. I think one of the greatest clergies of our time was Saint Cyprian Chistolwanga, who used to really speak out about the issues that were concerning
The
him.
Catholic Church rarely, it comes through normally. I have not monitored the new leadership, how they are faring. Maybe we've not had controversial issues yet, but previously, the Catholic Church would not keep quiet against injustice.
Sarah, let's talk about right now, I'll tell you something. Sometimes when we are talking about political things that are happening in a country or the evils that are happening, there's that general fear among citizens. There's a sense of resignation or the sense of fear among the citizenry for them to speak up against the evils or the injustices that are being committed at several levels. And that affects their contribution to making this country a better place.
I know, and the majority of Ugandans have taken a back seat.
Let's leave them.
Apathy levels are too much. It's unfortunate. If you read the book, The Strategies of War, I've forgotten the author. There are 33 strategies of war in that book. The last strategy, which is number 33, is to inflict maximum fear and panic amongst the population in order to control them. And President Museveni is at that strategy 33. Many people are scared of even whispering about governance. It's very unfortunate. When you go back to the President Museveni's promises, under his slogan of fundamental change, he was credited globally as being a revolutionary leader. And everybody thought that Uganda's bad days were behind them. The spirit of making the constitution. Nobody would have dreamt that at this material time we would be discussing fear, intimidation, torture, kidnaps. Under President Museveni's rule, the widely acclaimed revolutionary leader, the new breed of African leadership, the Messiah. Nobody would have dreamt that we would be discussing such things. It's very unfortunate. But the ambition to rule for life has had its weight on this country. It has compromised all institutions of governance in this country. It has compromised the conduct of the once praised professional army in the name of UPDF. Many people spent sleepless nights making a contribution to an army they thought would not serve any regime, but would serve Ugandans. An army with highly qualified and intelligent men and women. But if you look at the way it is used and abused to delegitimize democracy in this country, it's very unfortunate.
So people even fear to talk about it. How do we resurrect that?
Because of the repercussions. And Solomon, if you wanted to test that, let anybody today declare that they have an ambition in the presidency, and you just watch in 2 months how their lives will be turned upside down. You will have URA descending on them, and that is the evidence of state capture. You will have police and army. They will even have drones flying over their houses. They will monitor their children where they go to school. They will check on their wives and the lineage of their wives. They will check on everybody of their relatives to turn their lives upside down until you give up that ambition. That is the kind of democracy we are talking about when it comes to Uganda.
So how do we resurrect that energy in people to actually speak up and say, okay, this is wrong, this is right? Even there are people who know it is wrong, but they keep quiet about it. They sort of, let's.
Yeah, those with some little courage will call you to whisper to you something.
Exactly, they will whisper to you something. And that's civic space, because that space where you can freely express yourself in the way you're governed or in the way things are going on is enshrined in the Constitution, Article 38. But then we have a population that is increasingly sliding into the spiral of silence and taking a back seat because of, if I speak, they'll come for me. And that's bad for our democracy.
Of course, it is bad, and I'm sure the people who will be watching this interview know exactly what we are talking about. Everybody is under their beds. Everybody is just under their chairs. Even some of the people might watch this interview hiding under their beds, thinking that maybe a drone is somewhere watching them. There is that fear within the population. There is that intimidation within the population. And that only justifies the agenda of the president. If you want to rule with no end, or in the worst case scenario, then you hand over to your son. These are the things you must do. Because you know that you cannot have a monarchy within a would-be constitutional governance nation without doing the things that you do. So yes, as you see people celebrating, that say the transition is done because Muhoozi is there. These are the things that must happen. Unfortunately, I wouldn't mind President Museveni handing over to his son democratically, but leave the country to breathe. Let him compete democratically. Let him win fairly. If indeed he is popular and he is qualified to be president, let him be elected by the people under a normal election.
Sarah, from what you're saying, you're painting a gloom image or green picture of how civic space is doing. So it's from your end, this civic space has shrunk so much that we are left with just that little space to speak and to speak out on the way we are governed.
The space is closing. This is the realistic context of our country. The civic space is closing. Closing for political parties, closing for civil society organizations, closing for independent thinking members of the religious groups, closing for the independent thinking members of the cultural groups. We've had squabbles here and there. Kasese, Uganda, and the rest. It's very unfortunate. But the solution lies with the people. The people must know that Article 1 of the Constitution is not a lie. The sovereignty rights of Ugandans, they are the ones who can open up this space.
But Sarah, what are the dangers if that space continues to shrink?
I mean, it will be a complete dictatorship. Will be a complete dictatorship. There is no question about that. You can see the conduct of parliament. Is this a parliament worth their name? Look at the caliber of MPs. Solomon, would you now go and run for politics? Given all the information you have, you can't. So who are the people that are running for politics? Well, I know that these are our national leaders and we need to respect them, but most of them cannot put A and B together, cannot connect the dots of the work they are supposed to do. And those are the people that then a dictatorship would propel to go forward. And they will make sure the likes of you cannot attain political leadership. And once you close the political leadership, once you close the checks and balances, once you close the common sense in politics, then you are able to dictate, and everybody will dance to your tune. But the people can open this space. The people can open this space by coming forward. The people can open this space by stopping the vulgarization of their elections, because that is a vulgarization of their sovereign rights. The people can come forward and speak up. The people can join us and speak up and push back. The answer lies with the people.
Let's look at the opportunity that lies in opening this space. I think the internet has somewhat opened it up, that people can, go online and start campaigns and speak up and air out their views on the way they are governed, and it becomes virtual reality. The state has had so many of these campaigns, and it's no longer social media as we used to look at it, of just showing off your social life. It has now created an opportunity for people to speak up. Are you optimistic about leveraging the social media space to expand our civic space?
Well, digital transformation can defeat a dictatorship. I know that the country is launching a roadmap for digital transformation, but I detect hypocrisy in that so-called digitalization of Uganda. We have had Facebook closed for 3 years. You can only access Facebook if you have very good Wi-Fi that has inbuilt VPN, or you must pay for VPN for 3 good years. Majority of Ugandans are on Facebook as compared to other social media platforms. So when you have a country that has closed the biggest social media platform in Uganda for 3 years, going throughout to the country saying we are launching digital transformation. I mean, who is fooling who? Who is fooling who? Ugandans should ask them to first open Facebook. And if they cannot, then they should stop making a fool of citizens. Because what are they doing? And what is the reason that Facebook should remain closed in this country?
The president ordered for its closure.
Yes, that's the thing I'm telling you. You cripple institutions, you cripple leadership, you cripple civic spaces, and then you dictate. Is it justified to close Facebook for 3 years? How many young people were earning money through Facebook? How many businesses were running on Facebook? And then you make a fool of the same people that you are launching a digital roadmap for digitalization. Which digitalization? When they cannot access platforms of their choice.
Well, but at least it has somewhat provided an opportunity for us to come out and speak. We've seen Twitter Spaces.
Going to the digital platforms, they are good for citizens' participation. I do not have to wait for an interview to speak my mind. I just go on my handles and speak. I participate. They share opinions. They call out people. I saw the corruption scandal at the airport and how it played out. Immediately, within 1 week, the CIA people first came and spoke in tongues. The next day, they came back, started speaking normal English, and the third day, they took action. And I hope that extortion at the airport has stopped. Yes, citizens can achieve much more using digital platforms, and that's why I want Facebook opened, so that we have many more people participating in the digital governance advocacy.
So, Dr. Sarah, on the issue of expanding that civic space using social media, I must ask this question before we leave this show. There was a campaign, the NGO exhibition campaign, where a number of people came up and raised red flags on issues of accountability within the organization of CCG and other NGOs, speaking about accountability, nepotism, and a lack of transparency within the organizations of different civil society organizations, and you were specifically called out for not being transparent enough. What do you make of these allegations?
You know, social media advocacy is a wonderful tool. We use it in our other advocacy means. So people using it to call us out for accountability, ideally would be good. The unfortunate bit, and I want to use a comparison of the previous exhibitions. If you use, for example, the Kampala pothole exhibition, people were standing beside potholes and exhibiting potholes. People were taking pictures of potholes and even mentioning the address where these potholes are. If you go to the health exhibition, people were going to hospitals and demonstrating the state of hospitals in this country with evidence. People were even referring to Auditor General's reports. So when it comes to NGOs, what was the evidence? Other than somebody going behind their keyboard and typing their hatred about individuals. What was the evidence exhibited for NGOs beyond typing? Because Solomon, you can go and type anything on your status. It's up to you to make sure that what you're typing is factual or not. So when you go to NGOs, what are NGOs? Many people have no understanding of this. There was recently a ruling on the Journalists Association where a court said this is a private entity and we cannot entertain a complaint that is given as if it's a public entity. I'm sure I saw that. So when you go to NGOs, NGOs are ideally private entities, private volunteer entities that are formed in accordance with the Companies Act and now the NGO Act 2016. You set out your agenda. You also determine how you want to do it. If you go under the democratic principles, Objective 6 states that civic organizations shall retain autonomy on what they want to do and how they want to do it. So the power is also rooted in the Constitution. So when you go to let me go to the specific examples of Center for Constitutional Governance and what was exhibited. First of all, that was an exhibition of malice. If you say Center for Constitutional Governance is not accountable, we run a cashless system. Even if it is 5 shillings for buying a paper, we pay it using a phone so that there is a trail of the work that we do. Our partners usually carry end-of-project audits, all of them. Did they have questions about CCG? No. So, was anybody referring to our audit reports? Some of them are on the website. Did they refer to them? All our audit reports are with the NGO Bureau. No. So what was the evidence? We are validated every year by the NGO Bureau. We did not feature on the lists. Many people are saying, but how come you close organizations and you don't close CCG? We comply with all laws of the land. And for me, it was unfortunate, first of all, that the exhibition did not help Ugandans to understand the workings of NGOs, how they are formed, how they are run, or how they are governed. They use the Companies Act of Uganda and the NGO Act 2016. NGOs are validated every year by the NGO Bureau, and the Bureau publishes a list of validated NGOs. CCG has never missed on this list. Are we doing the work we set out to do? Yes. We have policies. None of the policies are violated. We have credible members of the board. None of the policies has ever been violated. So are we complying with the Constitution? Are we complying with the laws we set out to do? Are we doing the work we set ourselves to do? I'm one of the founders. Yes, we do. So the people, I know that some of the exhibitors had worked with the Center for Constitutional Governance.
And that's where I was coming, that some of the people who raised these issues deeply work
with
the Center for Constitutional Governance.
Not deeply, they were volunteers on our TV. CCG runs a sister organization, Civic Space TV. They were volunteers on our TV. They had arguments on whether they should be paid more money or not. And we told them Center for Constitutional Governance is a not-for-profit organization. We work with approved budgets with our partners, and we did not have money to pay them the salaries they were demanding. And that is what formed the Malice to blackmail CCG. And it was very unfortunate.
Dr. Sarah, one of the issues that was mentioned is that you employ your relatives at CCG.
Unfortunately, two of my relatives that were mentioned work and live abroad. My sister lives in the United States. She is a green card holder. She is a founder before she left for the United States. She is one of the promoters of Center for Constitutional Governance, legally. She has never worked with CCG as a salary earner, even when she was in Uganda. She has never been an employee of CCG, but she is a founder, promoter, and guarantor of the Center for Constitutional Governance, and that violates no law in the country.
We saw your responses on some of these allegations, and some people thought, okay, Sarah responded, but, why did she have to respond?
Like you say, we work on accountability. We had taken the large approach was to ignore these malicious, attributions to our organizations. But as a person who likes calling out people to account, I thought that I needed to put 1 or 2, 3 things on record. My other sister who was mentioned is currently in Germany. So these are the relatives that I work with that were mentioned.
Do they receive a salary, though?
No, they are not employees of CCG. So largely, and it's not just about CCG. The big agenda was to delegitimize the work that civic organizations do.
Where did this leave CCG?
We are doing our work. Our partners know the work we do. Nothing has happened. All our staff are there. All our TV volunteers are there, and the TV is running.
That exhibition called on donors and other sponsors of civil society organizations to come and look into the accountability issues, into the internal policies of different organizations. Did this also affect?
You don't need to call out donors to do that. They do that before they partner with you. You see, largely there was a lot of ignorance. There is no donor who is going to give you money without establishing how you work, without doing their due diligence. Donors do mid-term review of projects. Donors do end-of-project review. So you don't need to call them out to do their work or to determine how to establish partnerships. So that's why I said that there was very large demonstration of ignorance on what NGOs are, what they do, and how they do their work.
So last one from me, where you called it malice. Do you want to take any action against the people who put out this malice that you talk about?
No. These are misguided young people. They will find their way along their path of life.
Sarah, where do we go from here?
For me, the only solution for democratization and the betterment of Uganda lies with the people. Let's acquire knowledge. Let's know our rights. Let's be assertive in demanding for our rights and exercising our rights in participation of our governance, including making a decision as to who should govern us. That's the solution for this country. And making sure that that decision counts. Because I know several times we are doing civic education, the people ask us whether their decision matters. It's us to make sure that our decision counts and matters in this country.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for speaking to us.
You're welcome.
I've been speaking to Dr. Sarah Bireete. Dr. Sarah Bireete is the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. She's also an expert on good governance, trying to really break it down for us in terms of the civic space, but also where the country is going. I'm Solomon Serwanya, and this is The Hard Questions.